Hi everybody, happy Friday. I'm making a video here actually in response to a challenge that my brother gave of sharing the story of how I became alive. Meaning when I asked Jesus into my heart and I became alive in Christ. My story. And I shared his story on my page. I hope you watch it. If you did already watch it, you'll know that we grew up in a very loving home, very close to both my mom and my dad. Wonderful parents. I was daddy's girl, definitely, and I also was mama's girl in the sense that she was my best friend. The older we got, when I moved away from home, we'd talk 3 or 4 times a day, and even when she lived 20 houses away from me, we would talk on the phone or go visit each other daily. So we're a very close family. As a kid, growing up, very adventurous. Maybe flighty. Not much of that has changed, I think, in some aspects, at least the flighty part. But I can remember, golly, as far as being fearful, I wasn't very fearful. I climbed up on top of a church, and my dad was down below, and it was a flat top church. And, Daddy, catch! I'd run off, jump into his arms, and I would do that over and over again. I loved roller coasters, riding on the back of his motorcycle, just that adventuresome, no fear kind of spirit. And that changed for me one day, and it was a day that Mom was very sick. So her illness very much affected Derek and is a part of his salvation story in how she responded to it. And it also is a part of my story of how I became alive. There was a day she was very sick, and people had to come over with special tools and cut her wedding band and engagement ring off her hand. And she was just crying. She was in pain, and she was upset about those symbols that were so important to her needing to be removed. And that day was just tough in our house in general. And so a little while later, I remember pulling my dad aside and saying to him, "Daddy, is Mommy going to die?" And Dad, as lovingly as he could, wrapped his arms around me and said, "We don't know. The doctors don't know what's wrong with her. They don't know how to treat her at this point. But we can pray for her, and we don't know." And for the first time, I felt a type of fear that I can't really describe, but it was definitely one that gripped my heart. It was a fear of death. It was a fear of being alone, mainly. That if something were to happen to my mom or my dad or my brother, which was all that I knew at that age, right, that I would be alone. And that fear changed me enough that, a little story, I tried to learn how to ride a bicycle. I was well past the age that most kids learn how to ride a bike. I'm going to be straight up with you. I just didn't want to ride a bike, and my dad would hold on to the back of the seat, and the minute he let go, I would let go. And he would point me toward a wall and be like, "You can do this. You can steer the bike away from it. You've got this." And I'd hold on and I'd pedal, and he'd let go. And the minute he let go, I let go and I hit the wall. And I was like, "I'm not riding this bike without you, Dad. You got to hold on the whole time," because I was scared. I was afraid. And so that's kind of how fear started to change my personality and who I was at that time in little ways. And there was one night, I remember it very vividly. I remember it even more vivid than I remember the day I was baptized. So it was Sunday night, July 19th, and we were watching a movie at church called All the King's Horses, and it was a story about a family of 4, Mom, Dad, and 2 boys, and the parents were fighting and arguing, and then they were going through a divorce. And, I couldn't identify with that, but I identified with when the camera panned to one of the boys, the fear in his eyes, that his whole world was falling apart. And what could he do? What was going to happen to him? What was going to happen to his brother? And that was a lot of the fear that I had. What if something happened to Mom? My whole world would be falling apart. And at that moment, I went back to the simplest lesson that I knew from Sunday school. And sometimes it's the simple lessons that make the most impact, right? But the lesson was, with Christ in your heart, you will never be alone. Nothing can take you out of his hand. When you truly ask him into your heart, you will never be alone no matter what you go through. And at that moment I decided, I'm asking Jesus into my heart. That's it. This is the day. This is the time. I got antsy. I was telling my girlfriends next to me, Yvonne and Jody, that's what I'm going to do this. They're like, "Shh, be quiet. It's the middle of the movie." The altar call came. I made a beeline for my dad, and he gave me a hug, and he's like, "Okay, we'll talk about this." And after everybody left, he pulled me back in his office, and he's like, what is, you're kind of young, I think I was like 7, 8 years old. And And I said, I want to ask Jesus in my heart. And he said to me, you know what? I think you're too young. I don't think you really understand what you're doing. And so let's just wait a while. And I looked at him without fear. And I said, I'm going to ask Jesus into my heart, whether you're going to say it with me or not. I'll do it all by myself. And that's when he said, well, okay, if I can't talk you out of it, then I guess nobody else can. You know what you want. You know what you're doing. And I asked him into my heart. And I can't say my life drastically changed. I mean, I was 8 years old, but what's going to change? Other than the fear that was within me began to calm down. When Mom got sick, when she had a really bad day, I was no longer as afraid of facing those days because I knew I was never going to be alone. And if I look back over the course of the years of following Christ, it hasn't been perfect. There have been some real ugly moments, ugly crying moments, ugly moments where, to be really honest with you, I'm imperfect. And there were times when Satan knew my weakness of fear of being alone, and he used that, and it crept in my mind, you're alone. And I made some dumb decisions, whether it be being with somebody and I shouldn't have been. I had no business being there because I was afraid I was going to be alone forever or whatnot. But just, I can see and I can look back. Hindsight's 20/20, right? That the moments whenever I felt the most distant from God was the moments that I felt the most alone. Alone was the theme. And what pulled me back was Christ saying to me, you're not alone. I'm here. Don't forget, I've never let you out of my hand, and I'll never let you go. And so, here I am. Both of my parents are gone. And my best friend Lois, who was a spiritual mentor, she's since passed away. And I have a peace I can't describe, I can't explain, other than it came from that moment on July 19th. That process through the years of knowing with all assurance that I will never be alone because of Christ in my life. So that's a story of how I became alive, and I did not let fear take me over. And what's your story of becoming alive? I'd love to hear it. I hope you share it, and I'll talk to you later.